Coming up, an investigation is now underway to figure out how the Itaewon crowd crush tragedy happened. Top police officials, the fire department, and the district office are under probe to find out who is responsible for the deaths of 156 people. Voting to open for U.S. midterm elections on Tuesday. Polls show the Republicans may take the House, but the Senate will be a tight race. Plus, we're on a highway to climate hell. This is what the chief of the United Nations said to world leaders as he took the stage at COP27 in Egypt. Good morning. Welcome to New Day at Arirang. We begin this morning as the country launched a special investigation unit to figure out what exactly happened on the night of October 29th in Itaewon. A number of high officials are now under question to see if they held onto their post and carried out necessary duties, while 156 people died in a crowd crush. Our Lee Kyung-eun starts us off this morning.
Where were the senior police officers? That's the key question in the ongoing investigations into the Itaewon crush. To answer it, an independent investigation team launched by the police is probing senior authorities in charge of Yongsan-gu district, where the accident occurred. At the center of the scrutiny is the now suspended Yongsan-gu Police Chief Im Jae on suspicion of professional negligence resulting in death for allegedly arriving at the site too late and taking too long to report the emergency. The head of Yongsan Fire Station, Choi Seung-bam, faces the same accusation for allegedly failing to promptly communicate with the police and respond to the situation. And Park Ki-young, the head of Yongsan-gu District Office, who allegedly failed to come up with a crowd control management plan despite knowing of the risks. Meanwhile, in a higher police organization, the Seoul City Police Agency, senior officer Yoo Mi-jin is accused of being absent from her seat in an emergency monitoring room on the night of the crush. The investigation team says the probe could expand into even higher level organizations, including the Seoul City government and the Interior Ministry, which hold ultimate responsibility for maintaining public safety. Here at the National Assembly, there are also growing calls for a parliamentary probe into the accident from the main opposition Democratic Party. But the ruling People Power Party firmly rejects the idea, citing the potential for confusion and delays. While a parliamentary probe remains uncertain, lawmakers have held the first Q&A with relevant agencies. Much attention was on the growing calls for Interior Minister Lee Sang-min to resign. When asked about it, he says simply that he will do his best to carry out his duties. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
Now, of the 26 foreign nationals who died in Itaewon, the bodies of 15 of the victims have been returned to their home countries. 2 have been buried here in South Korea. According to Seoul's Foreign Ministry, 7 more will be repatriated by the middle of this week. The remaining 2 will be scheduled for a later date. As of Monday, South Korea has provided financial aid to the families of 17 foreign victims. Each received 20 million won in compensation. That's about 14,000 US dollars. And up to 15 million won, or about $10,000 for funeral costs. The ministry will continue providing the bereaved families with the help they need, including repatriation arrangements and applications for financial assistance. South Korea's first Vice Foreign Minister Cho Hyun-dong held a phone meeting with his American and Japanese counterparts Wendy Sherman and Takeo Mori. All 3 officials condemned Pyongyang's provocation and described the act as a serious threat, highlighting that the regime's ballistic missile launches violated multiple UNSC resolutions. They stressed such behavior will further isolate the North and strengthen the security cooperation between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. The trio agreed to work together closely to send a united message to Pyongyang on its provocations at the upcoming East Asia Summit in Phnom Penh on Thursday and at the G20 summit in Bali next week. Meanwhile, in a parliamentary meeting on Monday, Unification Minister Kwon Young-se said there are no concrete signs of an imminent nuclear test by the North, but he said it could be done at any time. When asked about the government's countermeasures, he emphasized South Korea will be prepared to respond thoroughly should the North carry out a nuke test. South Korea begins an annual military exercise as part of efforts to be better prepared against Pyongyang's provocations. The regime appears to be exaggerating its capabilities and even claimed to have launched cruise missiles last week. Bae-eun-ji brings the updates.
After wrapping up a large-scale combined aerial drill with the U.S. Air Force, South Korea's military kicked off its annual Taeguk exercise on Monday, aimed at countering the North's various nuclear and missile threats. The 4-day command post exercise will not involve field training exercises, but instead will be done through computer simulations. It will focus on honing capabilities against potential North Korean threats, with operational commands of the Army, Navy, and Air Force taking part. North Korea has strongly criticized the drill, saying it's being held to attack them. Meanwhile, North Korea on Monday said that it fired 2 cruise missiles last Wednesday, all the way into international waters to the southeast of South Korea. But Seoul says this appears to be false. The North state media claimed that the missiles landed in waters just 80 kilometers off of the south's coastal city of Ulsan. But Seoul's military said no such missiles were detected on that day.
North Korea's claims are far from the truth according to South Korean and U.S. surveillance and reconnaissance assets. There weren't any such missiles detected by our military.
The North also claimed to have mobilized 500 of its warplanes last Friday. But again on that claim, the South's military said it detected only 180 tracks of fighter jets on its radar system. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said this too is likely a fabrication, saying that not all claims made by North on Monday are true. Bae-eun-ji, Arirang News.
As in other countries, energy costs spiked in South Korea. There are growing concerns over electricity bills for this winter. Already last month, utilities, including gas and heating, went up more than 20% on year. Here's our Chae Min-jung with a breakdown of the digits.
Soaring energy prices are becoming a bigger issue for people in South Korea. On top of falling sales caused by an economic downturn, business owners are grappling with the rising costs of gas and electricity.
I realized that electricity costs have really increased because I reduced the amount I was using compared to last year, but the bill remains the same. I think they've risen by at least 15 to 20%.
Last month, gas prices rose by 36%, electricity rates by almost 19%, and heating costs by 34% compared to a year ago. Adding to worries for households bracing for winter, heating costs for households alone jumped by nearly 40% in October from 7 months ago. One expert says the increase is largely due to skyrocketing global energy prices, fueled by the energy supply shortage due to the war in Ukraine.
The global demand for energy has gone up since the COVID-19 pandemic settled down. Prices were already soaring before the crisis in Ukraine, but the war has brought up the prices even more. Even if the war is over, it is unlikely for energy prices to drop significantly.
Because prices aren't expected to fall in the near future, experts say efforts should be made to reduce energy use rather than relying solely on cutting costs. Chae Min-jung, Arirang News.
Americans will be going to the polls for the 2022 midterm elections, which often serve as an indicator of how the current administration is doing. In a tight race in a number of key states, experts are saying we'll know by early Wednesday morning who will take the control of the Congress. Kim Yo-sun has more.
The U.S. will hold its midterm elections on Tuesday to decide who controls the nation's Congress. This year, all 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 35 of the 100 Senate seats are being contested. In addition, 36 states will be electing their governors. The outcome of the elections will have a big impact on the remaining 2 years of President Joe Biden's presidency. While the Democratic Party held a majority in both the House and Senate for the past 2 years, they do so only by a very narrow margin. This in turn makes the midterm elections a tight contest indeed. Some key races will be Nevada, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. While experts expect the overall results to be in by around 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time Wednesday, some states like Nevada and Georgia could take longer if their races are very close. If the Democrats do come out on top, then President Biden will be able to continue with his plans on climate change, expand government-run healthcare programs, protect abortion rights, and tighten gun control. However, if the Republicans take control of either the upper or lower house, this would be a challenge for Biden. The midterms could also serve as a clue to who might be in the running to be the Republican presidential candidate in 2024. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The UN Secretary General says we are in a battle for survival, referring to the fight against global warming. World leaders and diplomats have gathered in Egypt for the COP27 climate summit and are urging collective efforts despite many challenges like the war in Ukraine. Our Kim Jong-sil reports.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres began his COP27 climate summit speech with a strong message.
We are on a highway to climate hell, with our foot still on the accelerator.
The UN chief told world leaders on Monday at the UN Climate Change Conference in Egypt that the planet is fast approaching a tipping point that will make climate chaos irreversible.
Humanity has a choice: cooperate or perish. It is either a climate solidarity pact or a collective suicide pact.
The climate pact Guterres refers to is one between the world's richest and poorest countries to accelerate a shift from fossil fuels to alternative energy sources. On Monday, Guterres urged the leaders to speed up funding to poorer countries already struggling due to the effects of climate change. The UN chief also emphasized the need for cooperation between the US and China. He called them the two largest economies and said that they have a particular responsibility to join efforts to make the pact a reality. World leaders from more than 100 countries are participating in this week's climate summit. French President Emmanuel Macron and British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak were among the leaders who called for collective efforts despite the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Putin's abhorrent war in Ukraine and rising energy prices across the world are not a reason to go slow on climate change. They are a reason to act faster.
So war should not slow us down. On the contrary, it has to consolidate our own agenda on biodiversity and climate, which are essential.
China and India are not participating despite being two of the three most carbon-emitting countries in the world, and U.S. President Joe Biden is expected to come later in the week after the U.S. midterm elections. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
A total lunar eclipse will be visible from South Korea on Tuesday evening, as well as a rare lunar occultation of Uranus, where the planet passes directly behind the moon, obscuring it from view. According to the Gwacheon National Science Museum, the lunar eclipse will be visible from all across the nation at around 8 p.m. It further added that the moon will appear blood red when it's completely in Earth's shadow. It also said the same phenomenon would not be visible in Korea within the next 200 years. The total eclipse will be visible in North America, Asia, and the Pacific region. The next total lunar eclipse will not take place until 2025. South Korea's COVID-19 situation is at its worst in 7 weeks. As the nation reported nearly 19,000 cases on Monday. Experts have been warning of another wave for winter since the last wave started phasing out. So let's dig deeper into the current pandemic situation with Dr. Kim Seung-taek, head and professor at the Zoonotic Virus Laboratory of Institute Pasteur Korea. Good morning. Always good to hear from you.
Good morning.
Now, authorities are predicting another major wave come December. Will it be as bad as the last wave that just ended a couple months ago?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, actually, just last August, the number of just the total confirmed COVID-19 cases almost just reached 200,000. And then the government maybe just predicting some numbers, maybe close to that number or just a lower number. But it's hard to just tell exactly how many just confirmed cases will just come out. But the thing is that this number will actually just dependent on a couple of just factors. The first one is actually our just neutralizing antibody levels, which is actually raised upon the natural infection or just vaccination. So when the level of neutralizing antibody levels is down, which is actually mostly occur after just a couple months after the vaccination or infection, then the antibody levels lowers, and then now we are getting just vulnerable to just sort of just a reinfection. But the good thing is that maybe just the severe cases and then the death will just stay just remain just stable and stably just low numbers. And also another factor we have to think about is our just behavior. Now we are actually just approaching to the winter season, so people are just tended to just stay in the closed just the space, which means it is actually very good just situation where the some airborne transmission can occur. So the good thing is we can actually depending on our just behavior, which is actually just in the avoiding like crowded places and a closed area, which will determine how many just COVID-19 cases just will just come out.
Right, and how are bivalent vaccines working out? The head of South Korea's health authority said he expects another variant to result in the further spread of COVID-19 as it happened every December in the past. Will the bivalent vaccine help keep figures low, even if this happens?
Well, as of now, many countries are actually just implementing some bivalent vaccines are the only options for just the boosters. And I think as a boosters, upon the some booster, just the booster shot, this will actually help just maintain the sort of just relatively high levels of neutralizing antibody. And I think this is pretty just helpful for the some very vulnerable people, including elderly people and the people with underlying medical conditions and the immunocompromised patients. But recently there is a very interesting just the papers are coming out, which actually says that there was no actually significant difference in terms of clinical efficacy in between just bivalent vaccines that we are actually using now for booster shot, and also some monovalent vaccine that we had actually used for our some prime vaccination. And so, which means that maybe our just original vaccine that we actually developed over the last 2 years are still just good enough.
Now, I want to turn the focus to COVID-19 treatments. Will Paxlovid still be useful against new unidentified variants to come? Or are they going to be like outdated as vaccines could be in certain cases?
Well, we know some monoclonal antibody that had been actually used for the last 2 years, and also some vaccines are now they are kind of just very vulnerable to the emergence of certain just the variants, which is actually we are observing just so far. But in terms of Paxlovid, actually the mechanism of this drug is quite different. So the vaccines and the monoclonal antibodies, the principle, I mean the mechanism is actually pretty much dependent on the viral, the spike protein. But sadly, the spike protein is mostly just susceptible to some viral mutation. But in the case of Paxlovid, the target of this antiviral drug is quite different. And then so far we have not seen any substantial, any just significant emergence of any resistance mutation against the Paxlovid. And there was some concern like COVID just rebound after some Paxlovid, but then after some careful investigation, this is not the real just a case for the Paxlovid. So still just the Paxlovid is the number one just the option for just treating just the COVID-19 patients. Although there is some issues like drug-drug interaction and just some kidney issues, some patients are actually not eligible for the Paxlovid, but mostly just the Paxlovid is still just a very reliable and then very effective ways to just treating just the COVID-19.
Right. I mean, I think keeping the numbers low is as important as giving the right treatment. Well, thank you again for your insights this morning, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you.
For a look at news from around the world, we now turn to our Matthew Ashley standing by at the Arirang newsroom. Good morning.
Good morning, Doyon.
Now let's start with news from the French Catholic Church, as a French cardinal has admitted to sexually abusing a child.
Well, that is right, Doyon. In a written statement on Monday, Cardinal Jean-Pierre Ricard said that 35 years ago he abused a 14-year-old girl. The former Archbishop of Bordeaux added that he is stepping down from his high-ranking role. Now, the admission comes after a report was issued last year shedding light on a number of child sex abuses within the French Catholic Church. Apart from Ricard, 10 other bishops are in the crosshairs of sexual abuse accusations being looked into by French police and church authorities. It found that over 70 years, individuals associated with the church sexually abused around 330,000 children in France. Many of the cases were swept under the rug in what the report called a systemic cover-up. Now, the U.S. Department of Justice on Monday announced the recovery of 50,676 stolen Bitcoin. Details revealed the seizure of the crypto assets last year from the Georgia home of James Zhang, who pleaded guilty to a single charge of wire fraud on Friday. Now, the Bitcoin, with a current value of over $1 billion, was found on various devices, including a small computer stored in a popcorn tin. Now, $600,000 in cash was also found. The Bitcoin was stolen from dark web marketplace Silk Road in 2012 after a payment system flaw was exploited. Zhang faces 20 years in prison if found guilty. Now, after being denied entry into Italy on Monday for being, quote, too healthy, 3 migrants blocked on a rescue ship in Sicily jumped into the sea in an act of desperation. They were quickly pulled from the water after jumping off a ship run by Doctors Without Borders. The ship docked in the port of Catania on Sunday, where local authorities allowed 357 to disembark, but refused entry to 215. This comes as migrants rescued by docked humanitarian ships have been met with resistance by Italy's new hard-right government, which has refused to respond to calls for safe harbor and drawn a hard line against illegal immigrants. Over the weekend, Italy's Sicilian ports saw at least 4 boats carrying over 900 migrants ask for safe harbor and to allow passengers to disembark. But among those ships allowed to dock, only minors and the sickly have been given permission to leave the vessels. And finally, the US's largest Powerball jackpot is set to be drawn, coming in at $1.9 billion. Now, the draw is set to take place on Monday at 10:59 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The record prize comes after there was no winner of Saturday's jackpot of $1.6 billion, which itself was a record breaker. New highs in Powerball jackpots are nothing new, ever since organizers changed the odds of winning from 1 in 175 million to 1 in 292 million in 2015. There has been no winner in over 3 months and 40 consecutive drawings since August 3rd, when the winner walked away with $206 million.
Good morning. The light drizzle has let up and we can expect much brighter conditions today. Morning lows are about 5 degrees higher than the same time yesterday in the capital, and afternoon temperatures will be hovering way above the season norms this afternoon. But dust levels in the capital region, Chungcheongbuk-do and Jeollabuk-do provinces could be high during the first half of the day. In Chungcheongnam-do province will be covered with dust all day, and unfortunately dust levels in western regions will get worse tomorrow. Afternoon highs in most parts will be 2 to 3 degrees higher than season norms. In southern parts of the country, we'll be seeing highs in the 20s this afternoon. Busan topping out at 21 degrees with dry weather alerts remaining in place. In sunny and dry conditions to continue with nationwide rain in the forecast this weekend. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
And that wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Stay with Arirang News, though, for more updates throughout the day. Goodbye.
백섬에